The medical world says, hey, they tried ivermectin. It's really not good. It doesn't work. Let's move on, conspiracy theorist. The American Society of Clinical Oncology released a statement recently saying oncologists should proactively ask cancer patients about ivermectin, and then they should tell them that there is no clinical evidence that it should be used outside of clinical trials. Now, if you read this, you will note it does not claim that they did clinical trials and then it doesn't work. They're just saying we don't think it does, and then look into whether or not your cancer patients are using it. So are they not going to look into it? When they say they're looking into studies, what do they mean? Dr. Mary Bowden is the author of Dangerous Misinformation, The Virus, the Treatment, and the Lies. She was one of the first people to successfully treat COVID patients with ivermectin during the pandemic. So I want to talk to her not just about this statement, but about the overall history, where we are now, because we could not say ivermectin on YouTube during the pandemic. We avoided it because of YouTube's terms of service that expressly forbid videos that suggested that it could be used to treat COVID. Now, YouTube's guidelines have since changed, but they still say that we can't have content that contradicts authority guidance on the prevention, transmission, diagnosis, or treatment of certain conditions in a way that would pose a risk. So I will say that still, the three-letter agencies, the FDA, the WHO, the CDC, advise that ivermectin should only be used for anti-parasitic indications. They still do not really recommend it. They continue to cite insufficient evidence. So, okay, that's the disclaimer. That's what we're supposed to say according to the laws of censorship. Now we can talk to Dr. Bowden, who has used it to great success. What do you make of this statement, first of all, and then we'll sort of back up and talk about ivermectin?
Well, I do want to mention something about the FDA and YouTube. And clearly, YouTube doesn't know about our lawsuit against the FDA, because the FDA is not allowed to tell patients and they're not allowed to tell physicians how to use medications. So their job is to approve the medications. They give indications for the medications, but there is absolutely nothing prohibiting doctors from using medications that are outside of the FDA indicated uses. And there is nothing prohibiting patients from taking medications that are outside the FDA indicated uses. So for YouTube to say that if the FDA doesn't approve it for this indication, you cannot talk about it, well, YouTube is completely misinformed on the law. And we actually took the FDA to court over this because they launched this smear campaign against ivermectin. It was August 2021. They put out the infamous horse tweet. It was the attractive healthcare woman nuzzling the horse, and it said, seriously, y'all, you're not a horse, you're not a cow, stop it. And then they also put information on their website concerning, when you can take ivermectin and when you can't. And they're not allowed to do that. We sued them. We won. We put them back in their lane. They had to take down their misinformation and remove all that propaganda against ivermectin. In terms of this cancer statement, I mean, it's the same playbook as what happened with ivermectin. And they basically don't want patients trying something off-label to use for cancer. And what I would say is, ivermectin is incredibly safe. I treated over 6,000 COVID patients during the pandemic. About 2/3 of those patients, I used ivermectin. I quickly became an expert on the safety of ivermectin. I never saw anything serious with ivermectin. Every once in a while, you'd have, maybe stomach upset or maybe mild blurry vision, but it was never enough where somebody had to go to the emergency room or call poison control. I honestly have far more problems with antibiotics in terms of side effects. So, if patients are using this experimentally, doctors are prescribing it off-label, it's not going to harm people to try it for the most part. There maybe if they have liver failure or, there's some extenuating circumstances, but for the vast majority of patients, it's incredibly safe.
Now, you said something that gives me pause. You said the FDA is not allowed to tell doctors how to use medications. But we saw during the pandemic that there were certain authoritative groups that decided they wanted to set in stone only approved protocols. And it kind of became effective. Do you worry that we're moving towards that world where there's only XYZ choices to treat things and that anyone who steps outside of the box would continue to be punished?
Right, because the vast majority of the public doesn't realize what the limitations are on the government and what they're allowed to do. And it's so hard to sue and fight back. I mean, it's really hard to sue the government and win because they have something called sovereign immunity. So the fact that we were able to was really shocking. And we had to do it on appeal. And it's an enormous amount of time and money to do that. So they can get away with a lot because people are not willing to stand up to it. And yes, it became normalized during the pandemic. We had the government, we had people in the bureaucracy dictating how to treat COVID patients. We see all these things with Fauci's diary, and they're leading the protocols for the entire country without even treating COVID patients, with no firsthand experience treating COVID patients.
Okay, that's outrageous. Now, I haven't fully dug into Fauci's diary. Let's talk about, does he say he wants to suppress information that may nullify his authority?
Well, what you see is he really is anti-hydroxychloroquine. It was like a knee-jerk response without any kind of curiosity or scientific inquiry into whether it works. It was basically, it's not going to work, and so we're not going to use it. And it's a little, his diary is very fluffy. Like, you get the sense that he's flying by the seat of his pants, and it's not very scientifically, his decisions are not very scientifically driven. Now, granted, it's a diary, and I get the sense that he just, at the end of every day, speaks into a microphone about what happened in terms of events and doesn't really probably show a lot of what's the true picture. But you do get the sense that he has got his agenda and he's sort of willfully blind to other options.
Well, from the cursory look that I've taken, if he was legitimately concerned about something like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, that would have been something that was top of, he would have raised the alarm. Well, how do I stop this? Here is exactly why. It doesn't read like that. Like, oh no, it's like, we gotta,
He doesn't even mention, he does not even mention ivermectin in the entire diary, which means it must not be that dangerous, right? Because it's not even, it wasn't even worthy of a mention.
Yeah. One thing I'll just share with you as a mom, sometimes when the pandemic comes up and I make a mad face, people who I suspect are more liberal leaning will say, well, about pandemic lockdowns or vaccine mandates, we just didn't know any better. And then I go crazy bananas because it's clear from reading your book, from reading the story of Pierre Corey and Dr. McCullough, that there was a lot of things that people did know better and that was actively suppressed. And so you can't have it both ways. We didn't know better, but we couldn't try these hypothetical things because we didn't know better. That's bonkers. That's crazy. So do you want to respond to that? Because it just makes me so angry.
Yeah, I mean, when I had my first COVID patients coming in, I hadn't done a lot of research. I remember when it came on the news thinking, well, this won't be my problem. This will be in hospitals. I had this quiet little ear, nose, and throat practice, and I just thought, well, and so when they came in, I just used common sense, from my training, that if you treat somebody, if a patient has a severe cough and they're not getting better with just, over-the-counter medications, then you cover them for secondary infection with antibiotics. And I like Z-Paks because they're anti-inflammatory. So even if you do have a viral infection, Z-Paks can help with the inflammation. I will do breathing treatments for patients that have a severe cough that's not going away, using steroids. I mean, these were just basic things that I was already doing that I started using. And then, hydroxychloroquine, I actually personally took that when I got COVID and my symptoms went away so quickly. And that gave me the confidence to start trying it on patients. I already knew about the safety profile and what to watch for and that sort of thing. It was, a lot of trial and error at the beginning, but then it became very routine. I mean, it became very easy, and I knew exactly what to do. I mean, when you treat over 6,000 COVID patients, it just becomes very almost mundane. So it really wasn't that difficult. I wasn't some, Nobel Prize scientist. It was very basic, and it was just having an open mind. And then there's so much information, hard data available on the internet to prove that ivermectin is safe. I went to the FDA's own website to find their toxicity data because they had to go to the FDA to get it approved. And there's, it's a little hard to find, but you can find it on the FDA's website. I did a literature search and I checked for accidental or intentional overdose from ivermectin, because if you do that search for Tylenol, you'll find thousands of studies. I couldn't find a single study showing that anybody had committed suicide using ivermectin or accidentally died. It didn't take much. It just took a little bit of effort and an open mind.
Right. And so just quickly circling back to this cancer statement, why are they saying that physicians should be actively asking their patients about whether they're using this? Is it like this seems a little big brother?
They're all using it. I'm telling you. Well, all the patients I know that have cancer are just using it, but they're not telling their oncologists, because what happens is their oncologists will scold them or fire them, or so patients are taking it without telling their doctors for fear that what will happen, will my doctor fire me if they know I'm taking it, or will they treat me differently? And especially the patients with more advanced cancer, where you want to throw the kitchen sink at it. And I think that's what prompted this. But I really, I don't do cancer patients in my clinic. But the few that have come through, I just haven't seen, they're taking very high doses of ivermectin, and I have not seen it affect them in a negative way so far.
Okay. But the like tattletale nature of this, it's suggesting that doctors are upset that patients are looking for something outside of the box that they're not already getting. And then let's just make sure we shut that down. And that's what piques my curiosity about this statement, is this, what could happen to them, eventually, like they could lose access to it. They could be punished. That's the kind of dystopian society that we could eventually live in.
Right. Well, and I'll say from the oncologist perspective, if you are running a clinical trial, you've got to have very stringent control over what's going inside the patient's body. So if you're in a clinical trial, the patient's secretly taking ivermectin, is that going to skew the results? So that's one reason, which is justified, I think. I think a lot of these oncologists haven't done their research on the safety of ivermectin. The oncologists don't get paid for ivermectin, but the oncologists do get paid for chemotherapy. So there's a revenue, perverse revenue incentive here. And then, ivermectin was branded during the pandemic, right? It's branded as this quack alternative horse dewormer medication. And in my opinion, the FDA needs to come out and issue a statement to correct the record, to educate the public, just that it's not just a horse dewormer, and it won a Nobel Prize in medicine. It's been given to billions of people in the world very safely. And I also think they should just make it over the counter.
This is a paid advertisement from Rumble Wallet. Let me ask you a question. How much control do you really have over your money? Well, technology has changed almost every part of our lives, and now it's changing how our money works, too. Crypto started out as just something a handful of people used and understood, but today it's a big part of how people save, invest, and move their money. If you've been curious but you don't know where to start, well, Rumble Wallet makes it easy. You can buy Bitcoin, hold US-backed stablecoins, or or even own digital gold backed by real gold, all in your Rumble wallet. It's a non-custodial wallet, which means you and not another bank or a platform control the access to your funds. And with their partner MoonPay, you can fund your wallet using your debit card, credit card, or bank account. Right now, for a limited time, you can claim $10 in US stablecoin. Just go to wallet.rumble.com/redacted, download the wallet, and enter the promo code redacted10. So let me tell you that one more time, wallet.rumble.com/redacted. You can get your $10 in stablecoin by using the code redacted10. You can even use your Rumble wallet to support your favorite Rumble creators like us or our contemporaries. So take control of your money and get started today. One more time, that's wallet.rumble.com/redacted. Don't forget that the code is redacted10. Terms and conditions apply. See the description below or visit rumble.com/promo official rules for details. So what they're not saying in this statement is that there has been clinical trials and that they're going to do it or they're going to look into it. It's very much like, we don't have high data, not we're curious, we're going to do that later, or wait, or anything like that. Is there any effort by the medical industry to actually run trials on ivermectin for something serious like cancer?
Well, it's not financially lucrative, so they'll never do that, in my opinion, because it's cheap. It's off patent. And it costs tens to hundred millions of dollars to run a clinical trial. So it's a huge endeavor. And if there's no financial payoff at the end of it, you're not going to run it. And the vast majority, 70% of clinical research is done by pharmaceutical companies because it's so expensive.
Right. But in the 1980s, Merck did commit to studying ivermectin for as long as it takes. What happened to that, do you think? Do you have a theory?
I honestly don't know. I'm not even familiar with that.
Okay. All right. But it was used in Peru during the entire pandemic. And so why do you think that was allowed there when there was so much consistency in vaccine rollout?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of what the culture is like in Peru. I know in Africa, in India, they use ivermectin routinely anyway in their population. So I think it's not as voodoo. It's not something that's considered as, odd or not mainstream in those countries. And perhaps that's probably the case in Peru as well, is my thinking.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that it's not profitable. It's because, according to my research, it's something called off patent, meaning that manufacturers don't have the marketing rights. And so competitors can make cheaper versions. Why do you think, did the opportunity close for them to make profit on this? So that's why they're not interested? Is that what you think?
Yeah, I think that's the case. Yeah, that's why they keep coming up with new drugs, is because it's profitable. They could reformulate it maybe, or add another drug to it and make it lucrative, I guess. But I don't know. It's become probably the most controversial drug we've ever seen, and so it's probably one of those things where they don't want to touch it anyway, even if they could figure out how to make money off of it,
because they would have egg on their face.
Right. It's just, yeah.
It's like
you're instantly discredited if you support ivermectin.
Right. But if you look in the history of it, it was found initially in soil samples in Japan, and that became the precursor for what we have now. It was, in fact, researched initially for humans and animals. How did you become aware of it so fast?
Actually, it was not through another doctor. It was my brother-in-law. He emailed me and he was talking about it, and he had heard it from his sister who lives in Australia. And Thomas Barodi was a scientist in Australia who I believe he was the first one to start talking about ivermectin. And I actually kind of poo-pooed it because I thought, well, it's my brother-in-law. He's not a doctor. I would be hearing about this from other doctors if it were something legit. And I kind of put it on the back burner. And I didn't really start using it until monoclonal antibodies ran out. So I was using monoclonal antibodies. They weren't controversial. I had plenty of supply. I could get as much as I wanted. And then the government took over distribution and they became harder and harder to get. And then the government completely shut them down. And that's when I started using ivermectin because I still had sick people coming to me. And I was sort of a skeptic about it, actually. But then once I started using it, I saw it was working.
And so the government took control of the supply chain of monoclonal antibodies. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, initially we would go through, we would just basically order it directly from the manufacturer. And actually, the government paid for them too. And it was very easy. And we would get as many, we would just say, okay, we want 100 doses, and we'd have it at our clinic in a day or two. It was great. And then I think what happened is they were apparently the southern states were demanding more of the monoclonal antibodies, and there was a unequal distribution across the country, and so the government took over, and then they started limiting how much you could get. I think it was also they were motivated because they wanted more people to get the vaccine, because if people knew that there was a great treatment out there, they were less likely to get the vaccine. And basically, the shutdown of monoclonal antibodies coincided with the mandate of the COVID vaccine. It was all in the fall of 2021.
Okay. Did you get an official explanation, or it just was?
No, I
Okay.
I remember feeling very frustrated. I was constantly texting my nurses, where are the monoclonal antibodies? I was emailing the people, like, what is going on? And it was not very clear.
Okay. And so then instead of, how did you know not to just say, well, just get the vaccine and we'll just, because you still had sick patients no matter what?
Well, I was testing and I was seeing that the vaccine wasn't working because I was tracking people based on their
Uh-huh.
back. I would say, oh, okay, this is how many people who tested positive, were they vaccinated or not? And what I found was the vaccinated outnumbered the unvaccinated and were just as sick, if not sicker. And so I just saw it wasn't working. And initially, I didn't see severe side effects, but I mean, then I started seeing all the severe side effects. And I still see people with severe side effects, even to this day.
Right. Because, again, when you say it was not working to stop transmission, it was never tested for that. It was not tested whether or not it would stop transmission. It was only tested on how severe the COVID would be if you got it. And that was obscured by the government and the media narrative. And so you then decided to move on to ivermectin. And you, at that time, could get it, though, through medical prescriptions, right? You weren't going to any feed store or anything like that when you were using it.
No, I mean, but it was hard. It was still very hard to get. I mean, I couldn't send a prescription to Walgreens or CVS or any grocery store. We could only send them to compounding pharmacies. And we created a list of safe pharmacies where we could send the medication. It wasn't covered by insurance. It was way more expensive than it should have been. We couldn't get it on weekends because most of these compounding pharmacies were independent pharmacies that had sort of 9 to 5 weekday business hours. I had, for the first time ever, I had people coming to me just stocking up on medications because they knew that they wouldn't be able to access them quickly if they got sick. I've never seen that before as a doctor in America, right? You have to stockpile your medications because you're not going to be able to get them in time.
Right. I mean, that's something I've been thinking about a lot because, we continue to escalate a war with Iran, and the supply chain for everything will be slowed down. The ingredients for things, the packaging for things, everything. And so that's something that I've continued to think about as we just face political uncertainty. And unfortunately, that's a necessary mindset right now. I don't want to ask you about the war, but what do you think of that now as a tactic?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic taught me that we do, in terms of medical care, just being prepared. Like for patients that are higher risk, I tell them to get a nebulizer and have that in their house, because that was another thing that was difficult to get during the pandemic. And if people were able to do breathing treatments in their home that was wonderful in helping prevent them from having to go to the emergency room or end up in the hospital. But it became hard to get those machines. So that's a example where I'm still, I have high risk patients get their flu medication in advance. So there's a single dose flu pill called Zofluza, which is, I think it's actually pretty effective. It's better than Tamiflu. I haven't seen any serious side effects. You just take one pill, and the vast majority of people I've seen have responded very well to that. So I tell people, get that medication now before flu season, because oftentimes when the flu hits, it's really hard to get that medication. By the time you get it, it's too late, or it hasn't done any good.
Right.
So yes, the pandemic has changed my advice to people in terms of getting more prepared.
Yeah. Now, you were punished by the Texas Medical Board for giving a patient ivermectin. You had to get, was it a court order to do it? And then a court was trying to stop you. You had already done it. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, he never got the ivermectin. So
He never did. Okay.
Never did, and he died. But he was a sheriff's deputy, father of 6, otherwise healthy, tried to get ivermectin before going to the hospital, couldn't get it, ended up on a ventilator for a month. And at that point, the hospital was discussing hospice, and this is Texas Hughley Hospital in Fort Worth. His wife wanted him to have the opportunity to try ivermectin because even in those late stages, they saw that patients were getting better on ivermectin who were in the hospital. Hospital refused, and so she sued them, and she asked me to testify. When I testified, they reported me to the medical board just based on my court testimony, and I'm actually suing them over that because that is very protected free speech in court. Anyway, they also then reported me, the medical board would not basically the medical board went on a fishing expedition after that. And I had a court order. We won the lawsuit. The court ordered the hospital to grant me emergency temporary privileges so I could give him ivermectin. The hospital appealed. There was a stay on the order that we were not aware of, but my lawyer told me we had the green light, that everything was good to go, not knowing about the stay on the order. The medical board has established that we did not know about the stay when I sent the nurse to the hospital, but they said that even so, I'm guilty because the hospital never officially granted me privileges. I had submitted 2 full applications, and my lawyer had talked to their lawyer, and everything was supposedly good to go. So I've been fighting for 5 years to clear my name. They issued me a public reprimand, which is online and on my record if you go search my license. And I will still be able to practice medicine, but I'm fighting on principle. And it's just emblematic of the tyranny that we were going through. And it sets a bad precedent if I lose this. Basically my options were defy the court order or obey the court order, defy the court order and obey the hospital, or obey the court order. And I chose to obey the court order. But if I lose this, it means that, okay, the hospital has more say than the court. So that's right now we're in the appeal stage.
But the picture that they're trying to paint of you is that you're this witch doctor who's insisting on getting to the hospital to give this guy a crazy medication. That's what they need out in the narrative. It's not clear when you read up on this that you were asked to come in by the patient's family. It's terrifying because several reasons. One is the painting of you, yes, but then also as a patient, could we not say, hey, I want to try this, and the hospital can just say, absolutely not. Like I've been reading up about intravenous vitamin C recently, and I'm scared that you could go to a doctor or a hospital because you're sick and they'll say, no, we're not going to do that. And so can you respond to, I guess, those two different things?
Yeah. I mean, we saw during the pandemic that you basically sign your rights away when you go to the hospital. And if you want to get a second opinion, you're pretty much stuck. I would like to see legislation where hospitals are required to allow patients to bring in an outside physician, as long as their license is in good standing. A patient should be allowed to bring in a doctor for a second opinion, because you could end up in some hospital, and if your doctor doesn't have privileges, you're out of luck, right? So
Right.
that would solve a lot of problems, give some autonomy back to patients so that they're not just beholden to whatever this doctor that they don't know in their hospital is saying.
Yeah, that's terrifying. That you, I mean, it's just the luck of the draw, and you can get someone who's just absolutely, nope, I read it in CNN, I'm going this way only. And that is the world we lived in, because some people were intubated so soon, or put on ventilators so soon, that could have precipitated their worse outcomes. So yeah, is there any legislation like that in the works? Has anybody thought of that, what you just said?
I have thrown that out there. I'm now a precinct chair in Texas, and I'm trying to push that to get it to the attention of the legislators. But no, not to my knowledge.
Yeah, not even in Florida, where you have a bit more medical rights. That's crazy. And so, yeah, if we could just circle back to this, because now Attorney General Ken Paxton has said that he will support you in your constitutional rights in this case. So does that help at all, or is there something the AG can do? Maybe even, I mean, this is not up to you, but he could sue the Texas Medical Board, if possibly. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that is being contested by the medical board. So basically, it got to the state district court. It wasn't the administrative courts, where Ken Paxton had no jurisdiction. So now it's in the state district court. And at that point, normally Ken Paxton would represent the medical board, but he refused, and he said, "No, I'm not representing the board," and listed all the reasons why. And now the board has filed a motion to force him to represent them. And so we're waiting on the judge's decision on that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's incredibly stressful, though. I understand why you would need to fight this on principle, not just for yourself, but again, because of the control of the narrative. Because we don't know whether or not this patient would have survived. The general knowledge about ivermectin, I think most people, when you think of the person just that you meet in the grocery store or in the mall, knows that the government maligned ivermectin, and now there has been some victory for people who used it or wanted to at least talk about it as a therapeutic. And so, but they don't know exactly where it stands now. There was no real apology. People were censored and punished. And those punishments, like yours, are still standing. So what is the general trajectory of that narrative? Can you talk about how, yes, it was maligned, but there's no mea culpa. There's no there's no retribution for people. And so the general public doesn't know its promise because we're not getting clinical trials.
Right. I mean, ideally, the FDA would correct the record and make a statement. I would love to see that. In terms of getting accountability for what they did to us over the situation, we actually are suing 7 state medical boards and the Federation of State Medical Boards. It's myself and 6 other doctors over the censorship issue, over our right of free speech. And like I said, with the court situation where I testified in court, I was punished for my testimony in court. And I had 2 doctors on my lawsuit lost their licenses over vaccine exemptions. One of them over writing an email newsletter to his patients, warning them about the COVID vaccine. So there are a lot of fights still going on behind the scenes in terms of making ivermectin more accessible. Some states have made it available without a prescription. They've passed laws, but it's still a little bit difficult to get. It's still not being carried in CVS, but Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Idaho, and Tennessee have all made it so that you can go into a pharmacy and get ivermectin from the pharmacist directly without having to have a prescription. So we're making progress on that. I think with these Fauci's hearing, we're going to see a resurgence, hopefully, in this interest in the pandemic, at least in our sphere. I think most of the Republicans have sort of moved on, unfortunately, but hopefully people start talking about it more.
Yeah, it's a shame that it's politically tainted by what I think is the ruse of partisan politics, because it's not useful right now.
Right.
Yeah. And so most of these attacks were ad hominem, right? On the doctors. They didn't actually come to you and say, here's the science and why it would be like if I were saying, hey, you should eat your shoe in order to get better from certain ailments, then somebody could come to me and say, here are the chemicals in shoes that you don't eat, right? So they didn't do, and I made that purposely crazy so that no one can accuse me of medical misinformation.
Well, a lot of these complaints none of them was a patient harmed from the complaints that were sent to these medical boards. It wasn't from patient harm at all. It was basically advice that mainstream medicine did not agree with. But we all in medicine, you should be allowed to have different opinions, and that's sort of how you make scientific progress, is by arguing it out. But the other side will not argue with us. They won't. They just shut us down, stonewall. There's no debating. It's just, you're a quack. You're a misinformation spreader. End of story.
Okay, we're going to pause one more time and tell you about our show sponsor, Lear. Now, have you ever looked at some of the biggest investment stories of the last few years and thought, I wish I'd gotten in on that earlier? Maybe it was AI, maybe it was NVIDIA or SpaceX. It always seems like by the time everyone's talking about an opportunity, it's too late for you and all the big gains have already happened. But what if the next opportunity is not just a headline grabber? It's what's making the headlines possible. I'm talking about silver. Silver is a critical material used in the technology behind the AI revolution. It's found in all of your electronics and the data centers that power your electronics, advanced computing, robotics. It all depends on silver. That's why silver's prediction is still more than $150 per ounce. That's why I want you to get a free copy of Lear's report, The AI Revolution. It explains why so many investors are taking a closer look at silver. Now, our friends at Lear Capital can teach you to invest in silver in whatever asset class you'd like and however you're comfortable. And you can call them. Call them at 800-613-3557 to get your free copy. And while you're on the phone, you can ask how you can qualify for up to $20,000 in bonus silver. Now, we bought silver years ago. It has been an amazing investment for us. We continue to do so. So check it out. Learn this for yourself. LearRedacted.com, or call them 800-613-3557. Or one more time, you can get started, LearRedacted.com. In my research, I found this metric that I'd never heard of called NNT. It's a measure of, you know what it is, but my audience probably doesn't, of a therapeutic's potency. So according to early studies, ivermectin's NNT was 2, meaning that for every 2 severely ill patients, 1 who would otherwise have died will have survived, and that's unprecedented. And so the things that they used that were approved, like Paxlovid or other therapeutics that were approved by the FDA, didn't have a high NNT like that. It was not nearly as impressive. So they're not coming to you with the goods, right? They're just saying, we don't like this and we didn't approve it. They're not using actual data.
Well, there are some studies, and what they'll do is they'll cherry pick the studies. Just like anything in medicine, you're going to find a study to support using something, or support a certain procedure, or support a clinical protocol, and you'll find other studies that don't support it. There's never 100% on, and so, but you can cherry pick studies to say, oh, well, this study shows that it does work, and then somebody else in the debate will say, well, this study shows it doesn't. We had 105 studies about ivermectin and COVID, and the vast majority of those showed a good benefit, and it varied in the degree of benefit.
But they're not showing harm. They're cherry picking the ones that say no studies. And sometimes you can give it late, or you don't. It can be, for instance, I found one on autoimmune disease where ivermectin was given with something else. So how the heck do you know what is useful, what's working there when it's given with another? So it's usually just they're never saying it's dangerous.
Right. And the problem is, I mean, it's messy and there's an art. And that's why clinical experience, I put more stock in clinical experience than any study. When you treat thousands of people with the same disease, you get a sense, okay, well, this person will do fine with just ivermectin. Well, this person's going to need ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and a Z-Pak, or, it's rarely a 1+1 = 2 in medicine. And that's what if they can't find a 1+1 = 2 study, then they're just going to completely discount it. But there are people that 1 million people died in the US supposedly from COVID. And why not, try things that are safe, especially when you have loads of doctors who are saying that it works.
Right. And so where do you think we might be going next? Because if there is another pandemic and the media is continuously warning about bird flu or what the next thing is, we can't preemptively say, well, there's this or there's this, or can we? Can we talk about things like I had said, intravenous vitamin C, or, what did you call them? Monoclonal antibodies. Is there a way to boost our knowledge now for what we're not going to be allowed to know next time? Is that a crazy question?
As long as Elon controls Twitter, there's hope, or X, right? Because I was knocked off of X for 5 months during the pandemic, and I was very careful. Like you were saying with ivermectin, I would use little symbols in the middle of the word so it couldn't get picked up by the censorship bots. And I do worry about AI basically taking over and directing, the protocol-driven narrative. But I also think that, I look at my kids and how they use AI, and they were much more savvy about it than me. They can spot an AI picture immediately, whereas I'm often tricked. And I'm wondering, okay, will the next generation be able to circumvent AI in a better way because they're used to having to always figure out, is this real or fake? I think for my generation, it's harder. So.
Right. And so, I mean, AI, of course, I do a test experiment before an interview like this and ask about ivermectin, and it's still very much get a hand slap for asking the question, but it can be used for anti-inflammatory and antiviral purposes. I mean, it does admit that it has been used, and there has been studies that it is effective in vitro, which means like in a test tube setting, right?
Right.
Against Zika, HIV, West Nile, influenza, and RNA viruses like COVID. I was able to push the AI to say that, but it will not come out of the gate and say that. So I wonder if the next generation can at least know to read between the lines and say, like when I was a teenager, I wasn't lying to my mom, but, lying by omission. And she would say, what are you not telling me? So will they learn?
Right. That's true.
Will they learn to say, what are you omitting here? Or is that, something we can promote, is realize what's not being said? Because I can see now, I've learned since the pandemic to read clinical trial press releases, and they're never saying the drug works. They're saying shown some promise, right? So we need to learn.
The first thing I look at now when I look at a study is who paid for the study, right? Right. And that's that. And then I start reading, and then I use that as a lens through which I read it. Is it okay if a drug company is sponsoring a study? The study is significantly more likely to show the drug works. And if it doesn't work, they're not going to publish the study. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, reading between the lines, the government, the media, I mean, given the way our politics is going, it would be very useful to have another pandemic. And so do you actually see rumblings of something, or am I being paranoid?
I don't know. They're always trying to rile up another pandemic, right? The monkeypox and then bird flu, and I don't know. I mean, actually, if they do try it again, I think people will be wiser and less willing to comply. So maybe it would be a good thing so that we can actually get some accountability for what happened,
Right.
or show them that we won't be rolled over next time.
Right. I spoke to Dr. Kelly Victory a couple years ago, and she had said, I think she's also in Texas, I'm not sure, that bird flu, if it does mutate to become transmissible between humans, number one, that might suggest gain of function. But number two, hydroxychloroquine should be useful in treating that. So these things that they're floating across, our bow, hantavirus, things like that, it will be hard to know, what we already have available that could treat it, given the vaccine only narrative. So where do you think we should, X obviously is a great place, but where else would you suggest we stay connected in case this happens?
Yeah. Well, Independent Medical Alliance is the offshoot of FLCCC, which FLCCC was the one that really provided guidance on how to use ivermectin for COVID. I leaned on them very heavily, and now I'm part of the organization. But it strives to be very factual, objective, non-biased, not influenced by big pharma, and not worried about censorship or that would be a good resource for actual clinical information if there were to be another pandemic.
Do you worry now that people just don't want to go to hospitals, don't trust doctors anymore, that could have a negative outcome in general?
Yes and no. I mean, I think people need to be on alert when they go to the hospital, which is, it's good and bad. Unfortunately, they have to be, but at least now they're aware that they need to be, meaning that you have somebody with you to keep track of what's going on, meaning that you have everything set up in advance in terms of what you want done. And I think, hopefully it motivates people to take care of their own health. I mean, the best thing you can do is just manage your weight, manage your stress, manage your sleep, exercise, do all the things you need to do so it doesn't get to that point.
Yeah. Well, it's been great to talk to you about this. I really appreciate you because you were one of the pioneers in this. And, when I talk to you, you realize you are definitely not this crazy lady, chasing people like, here, you need to take this. You just knew something and wanted to help. So, I feel really bad for what you went through.
Well, it was very meaningful, and it's been difficult at times, but the challenge has been interesting, I guess, and I've learned so much.
Do you feel vindicated? Or not
Partially.
yet?
I used to worry when I'd go to the grocery store, and I used to worry when I go to my kids' sporting events, and now I don't feel that way at all. So yes and no. I mean, I still think there are people. I know there are people out there that think I'm crazy still. But I've also on the flip side of a lot of support.
Right. Yeah, I felt that too. For just speaking out against things that didn't make sense, vaccine mandates, lockdowns, and things like that. And then you're labeled the crazy mom, in the group, and people don't want, oh, you're one of those, and it affects your kids.
Right.
And that's really tough because, you don't want your children to suffer for things that they can't completely defend. So I get that. Yeah. All right. Well, again, the book is by Dr. Mary Dr. Mary Talley Bowden. And it's called Dangerous Misinformation, the Virus, the Treatment, and the Lies. It's been my pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching Redacted. We'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. It's totally free if you want to follow us or subscribe. And if we brought you any value at all, please consider sharing this video with a friend or a loved one on social media. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.